Hey, there we go. Turns out everything goes much better if you actually have the XLR cable plugged in. That's live, that's live, that's the... I'm curious about that. So. Alright, we're ready to go. And thank you to HappyFace2711 for alerting me so quickly that there was no sound. It's very silly. Here comes my cat. Yeah, there we go. Hey, buddy. So, welcome back. Hello again. Turns out you gotta plug in the microphone. Not just into the microphone, but into the actual preamp, so silliness abounds. Yep, that's the captain. He's a good cat. Yeah, let's just dig right in. We got about 2 hours tonight. We're on chapter 7 of book 3 of part 1 of Les Miserables. So, yeah, kicking off. Ptolemy's Wisdom. In the meantime, a few of them sang, while the others engaged in rowdy conversation, all speaking at once. In the end, it was just noise. Ptolemy's intervened. "Let's not speak too quickly or without reflecting," he exclaimed. "Let's think first, if we want to be brilliant. Too much spontaneity simply empties the mind. Spilled beer gathers no froth. Slow down, gentlemen. Let's bring some dignity to the banquet. Let's eat thoughtfully. Feast slowly. Let's not be in any hurry. Consider the springtime. If it arrives too soon, it's blasted, that's to say, frostbitten. Over-eagerness spells the ruin of peach and apricot trees. Over-eagerness kills the graciousness and pleasure of a good dinner party. No over-eagerness, gentlemen. Grimard de la Reynière agrees with Talleyrand on that. A murmur of rebellion rumbled within the group. "Leave us alone, Ptolemy," said Blachevelle. "Down with the tyrant," said Fameuil. "Bombarda, Bombance, and Bamboche," cried Listolier. "A Sunday's a Sunday," Fameuil declared. "We're sober," added Listolier. "Ptolemies," remarked Blachevelle, "observe my calm." "You're the marquis of that estate," retorted Ptolemies. This feeble play on words, the Marquis de Montcalm, we got lots of these, was a renowned royalist, had the same effect as a stone thrown into a pond. All the frogs fell silent. So Bamboche is... This is virtual nonsense, words with a loose lexical connection chosen for their similar sound. Bombarda is the name of the restaurant. Bombance and Bamboche are colloquial words for a feast or a blowout. Marquis de Montcalm, the ultra-royalist Marquis Decadent de Montcalm, pronounced Montcalm, my calm, 1775 through 1857. "Friends," cried Ptolemies, in a voice of a man reasserting his authority, "pull yourselves together. This unexpected pun shouldn't be greeted with too much amazement. Not everything that comes out of the blue is necessarily worthy of admiration and respect. Puns are the droppings of the mind on the wing." Well, that's not fair. I love puns. "The joke lands wherever it falls, and after excreting a joke, the mind soars. A white splodge splattered on a rock does not prevent the condor from scaling the heights. Far be it from me to belittle the pun. I have a due respect for its merits, nothing more. The most noble, the most sublime, the most delightful of humankind, and perhaps other than humankind, have played on words. Jesus Christ made a pun about St. Peter, Moses about Isaac, Aeschylus? I used to know how to say this name. Aeschylus about Polynices, Cleopatra about Octavian, and note that Cleopatra's pun preceded the Battle of Actium, and without it no one would remember the city of Taurine, a name that sounds like a Greek word meaning ladle. That said, I go back to my exhortation. I repeat, brothers, no over-eagerness, no hurly-burly, no excess, even in witticisms, jollifications, high spirits, or quips. Listen to me. I have Amphiara's prudence and Caesar's baldness. There must be a limit, even to rebuses. Est modus in rebus. Moderation in all things. Horace, Satires, chapter 1, line 106. Ptolemy's plays on in all things. Pardon me. And the Latin word rebus, meaning puzzle. There must be a limit, even to meals. You're fond of apple turnovers, ladies. Don't overindulge your fondness. Even in the matter of turnovers, good sense and artfulness are required. Gluttony punishes the glutton. Gula punit gulax. The good Lord has given indigestion the task of teaching our stomachs a lesson. And remember this, every one of our passions, even love, has a stomach that mustn't be overfed. In all things, the word finis must be written in good time. We must keep ourselves in check, and when it becomes a matter of urgency, draw the bolt on our appetite, lock up our cravings, and put ourselves behind bars. The wise man is he who knows how to put himself under arrest at any given moment. Trust me a little. Just because I've studied a bit of law, so my exam results say, and because I know the difference between a mooted case and a sub judice case, and because I've defended a thesis in Latin on the way torture was administered in Rome during the period when Munatius Demens was the parricide's magistrate who investigated murder, and because it would seem I'm going to qualify as a doctor, it doesn't necessarily follow that I'm an idiot. I advise you to observe moderation in your desires. As sure as my name is Felix Ptolemy's, what I say is right. Happy the man who, when the time comes, shows a hero's resolve and abdicates like Sulla or Origen. That's actually really interesting history because Sulla, Roman generation before Caesar, maybe a little bit more than that. No, actually, because the whole big civil war, stuff like that, Sulla ends up claiming dictator power, basically kills half of all the Roman citizens. Just every day they put up new lists of people who are to be turned over for extermination, essentially. And one of them that he wanted killed was young Julius Caesar. But they were like, no, let him live. And he was like, okay. But in one of these Julius Caesars goes 1,000 Marians. Marian? I forget. Yeah, I'll say Marius, because Marius was the one in charge of the Marian reforms, which allowed anyone to join the army, not just landowners. But the point is that Sulla, after about 5 years of this, said, okay, I'm good, and he walked away. And he just tried to live as a normal citizen, and it did not go well in the end for Sulla, or for his reputation, because he killed so many people. So when you get to things like the Triumvirate and Caesar, once Caesar is like, I'm going to have power, he never let it go. Because he was like, it didn't work for Sulla, so I'll just hold on to it. Anyway, we're reading Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, on the Super Secret Saturday stream, so patreon.com/hotdadreads. Check that out. Where were we? Favourite listened with close attention. Felix, she said, what a pretty word. I love that name. It's Latin. It means the same as prosper. Ptolemy's went on. Quirites, gentlemen, caballeros, my friends. Quirites, Latin denoting Roman citizens, caballeros, Spanish for gentlemen. Do you wish to feel no itch? To spare yourself the nuptial bed and defy love? Nothing simpler. Here's the recipe. Lemonade, strenuous exercise, hard labor. Tire yourself out, haul boulders, don't sleep. Stay awake. Sate yourself with gassy drinks and lotus tea. Savor emulsions of poppy seed and Agnus castus with the added spice of a strict diet. Starve yourself and combine this with cold baths, girdles of herbs, the application of a lead plaque, lotions made with Goulard's extraction, and poultices made with vinegar and water. I'd rather have a woman, said Listolier. Beware of women, Ptolemy's responded. Woe to the man who surrenders himself to the fickle heart of a woman. A woman is scheming and perfidious. She hates the serpent out of professional jealousy. The serpent is the shop across the way. Ptolemies, cried Blachevelle. You're drunk. Of course I am, said Ptolemies. Be cheerful then, said Blachevelle. Agreed, replied Ptolemies. And refilling his glass, he rose to his feet. Glory be to wine! Nunc te Bacche canam. Now, Bacchus, will I sing to you. Virgil, Georgics, Book 2, Line 2. This, of course, is not Spanish, but Latin. Forgive me, ladies, that's Spanish. And the proof, senoras, is this. Such being the people, such is the cask. The Oroba of Castile contains 16 liters, the Cantaro of Alicante, 12, the Almude of the Canaries, 25, the Quartin of the Balearic Isles, 26, Tsar Peter's barrel, 30. Long live that great star, and long live his barrel, which was greater still. Ladies, a word of friendly advice. Take the man sitting on the wrong side of you for your lover, if you so please. It's in the nature of love to err. Romance isn't meant to make life a brutalizing misery for itself. Like an English housemaid with calluses on her knees from scrubbing floors. Sweet romance isn't meant for that. It gladly roves. It has been said that to err is human. I say, to err is to be amorous. Ladies, I adore you all. Oh, Zéphine, oh, Josephine. With your more than unconventional prettiness, you'd be attractive if you weren't crumpled. You look like a pretty face that someone has sat on by mistake. As for Favourite, oh, nymphs and muses. Blachevelle was stepping over the gutter in Rue Guérin-Boisseau one day when he saw a beautiful girl in smooth white stockings showing off her legs. This prelude was to his liking, and Blachevelle fell in love. The girl he loved was Favourite. Oh, Favourite, you have Ionian lips. There was a Greek painter called Euphorion, nicknamed the Painter of Lips. That Greek alone would have been worthy to paint you a mouth. Listen, before you, there was no creature worthy of that name. You were made to win the apple like Venus, or to eat it like Eve. Beauty begins with you. I have mentioned just now Eve. It was you that created her. You deserve the patent for the invention of the beautiful woman. Oh, Favourite, I'll now stop addressing you in familiar terms because I'm switching from poetry to prose. In the Paean to Favourite, Ptolemies has been using the to form, so I keep forgetting that, this is a translation from French, so it's always fun when that happens. You spoke of my name a little while ago. I was touched. But whoever we may be, let us distrust names. They can be misleading. My name's Felix, but I'm not happy. Words are liars. Let's not blindly accept the suggestions they give us. It would be a mistake to write to Liege for corks and to pas for leather gloves. Cork, Liege, does not come from Liege in Belgium, and leather skin, pas, does not come from pas, pronounced identically in southwest France. Miss Dahlia, in your place, I'd call myself a Rosa. A flower should smell sweet, and a woman should have some wit. I say nothing of Fantine. She's a stargazer, a dreamy, pensive, sensitive soul. She's a phantom in the form of a nymph with the modesty of a nun, astray in the life of the Parisian grisette, but taking refuge in her illusions, singing and praying and gazing into the blue without really knowing what she's seeing or what she's doing, and who, with eyes turned heavenwards, wanders about in a garden where there are more birds than actually exist. Oh, Fantine, let me tell you this. I, Ptolemy's, am an illusion. But she doesn't even hear me, this fair maid of fancy. Besides, everything about her is freshness, softness, youth, sweet morning light. Oh, Fantine, a girl who deserves to be called Marguerite or Pearl. You're a woman of the most lustrous beauty. Pearl, an archaic meaning of Marguerite, is pearl. Neat. Ladies, a second piece of advice. Do not marry. Marriage is a form of grafting. It can take well or badly. Avoid that risk. But why bother telling you this? I'm wasting my breath. Girls are incurable when it comes to marriage, and whatever we sensible chaps may say won't prevent the waistcoat makers and shoe stitchers from dreaming of husbands with diamonds galore. Well, that's as may be, but remember this, my dears. You eat too much sugar. You have but one fault, O women, and that's nibbling sugar. Oh, rodent sex, your pretty little white teeth adore sugar. Now listen carefully. Sugar is a salt. All salts cause dehydration. Sugar is the most dehydrating of all salts. It draws the blood fluids out of the veins. Hence coagulations, then solidification of the blood. Hence tuberculosis in the lungs. Hence death. That's why diabetes is little short of consumption. So don't crunch sugar and you'll live. I now turn to the men. Gentlemen, make conquests. Steal your darlings from each other without remorse. Change partners. There are no friends in matters of love. Wherever there's a pretty woman, there's open hostility. No quarter given, all out war. A pretty woman is a casus belli. A pretty woman is flagrant provocation. All the invasions of history have been brought about by petticoats. Woman is man's entitlement. Romulus carried off the Sabines. William carried off the Saxons' womenfolk. Caesar carried off the Romans. The man who isn't loved hovers like a vulture over other men's mistresses. And as for myself, to all those poor unfortunates who are widowers, I give you Bonaparte's sublime address to the army of Italy. Soldiers, you have nothing. The enemy has it all. Ptolemy's paused. Catch your breath, Ptolemy's, said Blachevelle. At that point, Blachevelle, accompanied by Listolier and Fameuil, launched into one of those art student songs sung to a plaintive tune, composed of the first words that spring to mind, extravagantly rhymed or not at all, as devoid of meaning as the swaying of a tree or the sound of the wind. Words born out of pipe smoke. My whole foot's asleep and I can't feel that I'm stepping on stuff. Words born out of pipe smoke and dispersing with it as it clears. This is the verse with which the group responded to Ptolemy's tirade. The simple Simons paid a fee to an intermediary for Sire Clermont Tonnerre to be made abbot on St. John's Day. But abbot he could never be, for no anointed monk was he. So their intermediary resentfully returned their fee. This was no way to dampen Ptolemy's exuberances. He drained his glass, refilled it, and resumed. Down with wisdom! Forget everything I said. Let's be neither prudent nor Let's be neither prudish nor prudent nor pompous asses. I propose a toast to merriment. Let's be merry. Let's complete our law studies with food and folly, indigestion and digest. Let Justinian be lord of misrule and reverie be his mistress. Joy in the lower depths. Live, O creation. The world is a great diamond. I'm happy. The birds are amazing. What jollity everywhere. The nightingale is an Elevo who sings gratis. Summer, I salute you. O Luxembourg, O Georgics of Rue Madame and Ali de l'Observatoire, O romantic soldier boys, O all those lovely nursemaids who have nothing their own. The Pampas of America would attract me, had I not the arcades around the Odeon. My soul soars over virgin forests and savannas. Everything is beautiful. Flies are buzzing in the sunbeams. The sun has with a sneeze produced the hummingbird. Kiss me, Fantine. He got the wrong girl. He kissed Favourite. Take a tiny break there. What buttons did my cat press? He's updated the stream info, and I have no idea what he updated it to, so, you know. Hopefully there's a bunch of, just cat paws on this. The new stream info is just, you know, the Q over and over again. I skipped ahead a little bit in the book just to kind of see. Oh, there's so much to this book. It's a very long book. Here we go, chapter 8, Death of a Horse. The food's better at Eden than at Bombarda, exclaimed Zéphine. I prefer Bombarda to Eden, declared Blachevelle. Pardon me. It's more luxurious, more oriental. Look at the room downstairs. There are mirrors on the walls. I prefer ices on my plate, said Favourite. Blachevelle was insistent. Look at the knives. Bombardas have silver handles. The ones at Eden are bone. Well, silver's more valuable than bone. Except for those who have a silver chin, observed Ptolemies. Ooh, the word mirror and ice is the same in French. I believe it's glace. Or just glas. I have no idea. I don't speak French. At the moment, he was looking at the dome of Les Invalides, visible from Bombarda's window. There was a pause. Ptolemies, exclaimed Fameuil. The Stolier and I were having a discussion just now. A discussion's good, replied Ptolemies. A quarrel's better. We were having a philosophical argument. Well, which do you prefer, Descartes or Spinoza? Desague? No idea, said Ptolemies. Having delivered this verdict, he drank and went on. I consent to live. It's not all over yet for this earth, since we can still rave. For this I give thanks to the immortal gods. We lie, but we laugh. We affirm, but we doubt. The unexpected springs from the syllogism. That's wonderful. There are still human beings on earth capable of gleefully opening and closing the jack-in-the-box of paradox. What you are thoughtlessly consuming, ladies, is Madeira wine, I'll have you know, from the Corral de Frere vineyard, which is 1,800 feet above sea level. Consider what you're drinking. 1,800 feet, and Monsieur Bombarda, the magnificent proprietor of this restaurant, gives you those 1,800 for 4 francs and 50 centimes. Centimes? Centime, my love says. Fameuil broke in again. Ptolemies, your opinions inspire confidence. Who's your favorite author? Quin? No. Show. And Ptolemies went on. Have I skipped footnotes here? We'll keep going. And Ptolemies went on. All honor to Bombarda. If he could procure me an oriental dancing girl, he would be the equal of Munfis of Elephanta and of Thygelion of Caronia. If he could bring me a Greek courtesan, for, O Mesdames, there were Bombardas in Greece and Egypt. Apuleius tells us so. Alas, it's always the same. There's nothing new, nothing we haven't already seen in the Creator's creation. Nil sub sol novum, says Solomon. Ecclesiastes 1:9. There is nothing new under the sun, traditionally attributed to Solomon. Amor omnibus idem, says Virgil. Love is the same for all. Virgil, Georgics, Book 3, line 244. And Carabine joins Carabine on the river boat to Suncloud, just as Aspasia joined Pericles with the fleet at Samos. The word carabine, originally a mounted soldier, came to be a familiar term for a medical student, and a carabine, cavalry rifle, as used here, would be the medical student's lady friend. Ho ho! That's clever. One last time, do you know who Aspasia was, ladies? Although she lived at a time when women did not yet have a soul, she was a moving spirit. A spirit of a rosy and crimson hue, fierier than fire, fresher than the dawn. Aspasia was a creature in whom the two extremes of womanhood met, the harlot goddess. Socrates combined with Manon Lacan. Aspasia was created in case Prometheus needed a whore. Yeah. Now in full flight, Ptolemies would have found it difficult to stop, had not a horse dropped dead on the embankment at that very moment. Shocked, cart and speaker were pulled up short. It was a mare from the Beauce region. Probably not Beauce region. Old and thin and fit for the knacker's yard, pulling a very heavy cart. Just in front of Bombarda's, the defeated, worn-out beast refused to go any further. The incident attracted a crowd. Cursing and indignant, the carters hardly had time to utter with appropriate energy the fateful words, "Damn you!" backed up with a ruthless lash of the whip, then the nag collapsed, never to rise again. As the outcry from the passers-by, Ptolemies' cheerful audience looked round, and he took the opportunity to end his homily with this doleful verse. It belonged to a world where coaches and carriages share the same fate. And being a nag, it lived as nags do, but the space of a damn you. Poor horse, sighed Fantine. Ptolemies is parodying 4 lines of verse by Malherbe from his poem Consolation et Monsieur de Perrier. She belonged to a world where the loveliest things meet the worst fate, and being a rose, she lived as roses do, but the space of a morning. I know that poem. Why do I know that poem? And I know the name Malherbe. I'm assuming there's probably some Gilvin and Sullivan to that, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's more famous than I think it is. And Dahlia exclaimed, "There goes Fantine, feeling sorry for horses now. How can anyone be so stupid?" Folding her arms and tossing her head, Favourite at that moment gave Ptolemies a determined look and said, "Now then, what about this surprise?" "Well, you may ask. The moment has arrived," replied Ptolemies. "Gentlemen, it is now time to surprise these ladies. Ladies, give us a moment." "It begins with a kiss," said Blachevelle. "On the forehead," added Ptolemies. Each solemnly planted a kiss on his mistress's forehead. Then, placing a finger to their lips, all 4 headed for the door, one after the other. Favourite clapped her hands as they left. "This is already good fun," she said. Don't be gone too long, murmured Fantine. We'll be waiting for you. Taking a little break. What's going on in the chat? Yeah, how many streams will it take to finish the book? I'm guesstimating here, because I had some absences last week while my daughter was teething. But basically, we got through about 100 pages in 2 weeks. But that was only doing an hour a night. I'm trying to do 2 hours a night now. And we'll see what my daughter lets me do. But, so the idea, we got 100 pages there. There's 1,300 pages in the book. So 1,200 pages. So doing 2 hours a night. I'm thinking probably 12 weeks. I don't know. And that's still 3 months, right? So it's going to take a while. But, it's Hot Dad Reads. This is what we do. We gather together. I read a book. And listeners now, or, if they listen later on the stream on their own time or on YouTube or something, get to have something to listen to while they do the dishes, So there's no race to the end. I'm just going to enjoy reading all of this book. As I said yesterday, this is like 2 Moby Dicks put together. And I read Moby Dick to my daughter while she was very, very little. She was only a few months old. And that was only like 5 pages a night. That took 4 months. That was ridiculous. So I feel like when I'm done with this, we'll look at Haji Murad. And then I might actually do Moby Dick after this because it'll feel short in comparison. Yeah, possibly. But we're going to try to read more and faster and hopefully get it done sooner. But I saw they also spoke Spanish. I speak nothing. I speak English, and I don't speak French, so I'm always butchering all the French in here. So, 1,000 pardons, please. Chapter 9, A Merry End to Mirth. Left by themselves, the young girls, 2 at each window, rested their elbows on the windowsills, chatting, leaning out, and talking from one casement to the other. They saw the young men emerge arm in arm from the Bombarda Tavern. Their lovers turned round, waved to them, laughing, and discovered unto the dusty Sunday throng, that invades the Champs-Élysées every week. "Don't be gone long," cried Fantine. "What are they going to bring us?" said Zéphine. "Something pretty, for sure," said Dahlia. "Something gold for me," said Favourite. They were soon distracted by the activity on the riverside, which they could discern through the branches of the tall trees, and which kept them very entertained. It was the time of day when the mail coaches and stage coaches set off. Nearly all the mail coaches en route for the south and west passed along the Champs-Élysées. Most of them followed the embankment and went through the Passy Gate. Every minute, some huge carriage, painted yellow and black, heavily loaded, noisily harnessed, its shape distorted with trunks, tarpaulins, and cases, filled with passengers who immediately disappeared from sight, came hurtling through the crowd in apparent fury, pulverizing the roadway, turning all the cobbles into flintstones, sending sparks flying for all the world like a blacksmith's forge, with dust for smoke. This commotion delighted the young women. Favourite exclaimed, "What a din! It sounds like a pile of chains flying off." Now one of these vehicles, which was not very clearly visible through the thick foliage of the elm tree, happened to stop for a moment, then set off again at a gallop. This surprised Fantine. "That's odd," she said. "I thought the stagecoach never stopped." Favourite shrugged. "She's amazing, this Fantine, a curiosity worth coming to see in her own right. She marvels at the simplest things. Suppose I'm a traveler. I say to the stagecoach, 'I'm going on ahead, you can pick me up at the embankment as you come by.' The stagecoach comes by, sees me, stops, and picks me up. It happens every day. You know nothing of life, my dear." A certain amount of time went by in this way. All at once, Favourite seemed to wake up. "Well now," she said, "what about that surprise?" "Yes, you're right," said Dahlia. "Where's the famous surprise?" "Taking a very long time," said Fantine. As Fantine concluded this wistful remark, the waiter, who had served their meal, came in. He held in his hand something that looked like a letter. "What's that?" asked Favourite. The waiter replied, "It's a note those gentlemen left for you ladies." "Why didn't you bring it straight away?" "Because," said the waiter, "the gentleman told me not to deliver it to you ladies before an hour had gone by." Favourite snatched the piece of paper from the waiter's hand. It was indeed a letter. "Strange," she said. "There's no address. But look what's written on it. This is the surprise." She hurriedly unsealed the letter, opened it, and read. She could read. "O loving mistresses, we would have you know that we have parents. Parents are not something you are very familiar with. In the civil code for respectable children, they are called fathers and mothers. Now these parents are complaining. These old folk are appealing to us. These good men and women are calling us prodigal sons. They want us to come home and are offering to kill calves for us. Being dutiful, we are obeying them. By the time you read this, 5 spirited horses will be taking us back to our papas and mamas. We are decamping, as Bousseau puts it. The expression used here, nous fichons le camp, is informal and is facetiously ascribed to the great clerical orator Jacques Benet Bousseau. We are leaving. We have left. We are fleeing in the arms of Lafitte on the wings of Caillard. The Toulouse stagecoach wrests us from the abyss, and the abyss is you, oh, our beautiful darlings. We are returning to order, to duty, to society at a brisk pace, at the speed of 8 miles an hour. It is important for the country that, like everyone else, we should be prefects, family men, rural police officers, and state councilors. Respect us. We are sacrificing ourselves. Lament us briefly, and replace us rapidly. If this letter distresses you, tear it to pieces. Farewell. For nearly 2 years we have made you happy. Do not hold it against us. Signed, Blachevelle, Famouet, Listolier, Felix Ptolemies. P.S. The meal is paid for. The 4 young women looked at each other. Favourite was the first to break the silence. "Well, anyway," she exclaimed, "it's a good joke." "It's very funny," said Zéphine. "It must have been Blachevelle who thought of it," said Favourite. "I love him for that. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. That's life." "No," said Dahlia. "It's one of Ptolemy's ideas. It's just like him." "In that case," retorted Favourite, "down with Blachevelle and long live Ptolemies." "Long live Ptolemies!" cried Dahlia and Zéphine, and they burst out laughing. Fantine laughed with them. An hour later, back in her room, she wept. He was, as we said, her first love. She had given herself to this Ptolemies as to a husband, and the poor girl had a child. Drinking water. So lately, while my voice has been sounding and feeling very good, I mean, like keeping track of the things I'm eating and the effect they have on it. But then the other day at Costco, I bought like a case of the Mexican Coca-Colas. They're so good, and they're in the glass bottles, and they're not great for my voice. So I've got like a bunch in the basement and a couple more in the fridge. I'm going to enjoy them, and then I'm going to not have those very often. Try to get the nice rumblies still in my throat. Oh, hey, hey. Is that a raid from Matsukinox? Why, hello and greetings. We're just about to start Book 4 of Part 1 of Les Miserables, so you're just in time. Where we just left off, all the dudes have left the ladies in France, and Fantine has lost the man with whom she gave herself as to a husband, and we're learning that poor Fantine is with child. But now we're on to another book, so who knows who we're going to be talking to now. Here we go. Chapter 1. One Mother Meets Another. There was, at Montfermeil, near Paris, during the first quarter of this century, an inn of sorts, which no longer exists. This place was run by people called Thénardier, husband and wife. It was located in Rue des Boulangers. I don't speak French, no idea. Belanger. Above the door was a board nailed flat against the wall. On this board was painted something that looked like a man carrying on his back another man who wore the big gilt epaulets of a general with large silver stars on them. Red splotches represented blood. The rest of the picture was all smoke and probably depicted a battle. Underneath were written these words, "The Sergeant of Waterloo." Nothing is more commonplace than a wagon or cart at the door of an inn. Nevertheless, the vehicle, or to be more accurate, the segment of a vehicle, that one evening in the spring of 1818 blocked the street in front of the Sergeant of Waterloo by its massive presence, would surely have attracted the attention of any painter who happened to be passing that way. It was the front section of one of those trailers commonly used in woodland regions, and which served to transport timber beams and tree trunks. This front section consisted of a massive swiveling iron axle fitted with a heavy shaft, supported on two huge wheels. The whole thing was bulky, imposing, and misshapen. It looked like the mounting of a gigantic cannon. Ruts had left on the wheels, rims, hubs, axle, and a shaft a layer of mud. A hideous, jaundiced coating quite similar to that which is apt to be used for the embellishment of our cathedrals. The wood was hidden under the mud, and the iron under the rust. Draped under the axle was a huge chain worthy of a fettered Goliath. This chain conjured up not the wooden beams it was meant to haul, but the mastodons and mammoths it might have harnessed. There was something suggestive of the forced labor camp about it, but a forced labor camp on a Herculean and superhuman scale it looked like the loosed chain of some monster. Homer would have tethered Polyphemus with it, and Shakespeare Caliban. Why was that trailer front section standing there in the street? First, to block the street. Then also to rust away completely. There is a host of institutions in the old social order that are to be found similarly left in that way, out in the open, and which have no other reason for being there. The center of the chain hung quite close to the ground beneath the axle, and on that particular evening, sitting coupled in the curve of it, as on the rope of a swing, were two little girls exquisitely entwined, one about 2.5 years old, the other 18 months, the younger in the arms of the elder. A cleverly knotted neckerchief prevented them from falling off. A mother had seen this dreadful chain and said, "Now there's something for my children to play on." The two children, charmingly dressed moreover, and with some care, were radiant. They looked like two roses on a scrap heap. Their eyes were glorious, their fresh cheeks glowing with happiness. One had chestnut hair, the other brown. Their innocent faces were two pictures of wonder and delight. Scents wafting from a nearby flowering shrub seemed to passers-by to emanate from them. The 18-month-old displayed her sweet, bare little tummy with that chaste immodesty of infancy. Above and around these two delicate creatures, basking in happiness and infused in light, the gigantic trailer section, black with rust, almost fearsome, a tangled snarl of curves and sharp angles, looked like the rounded entrance to a cave. Pardon me. A few paces away, squatting on the doorstep of the inn, the mother, not in fact a very prepossessing woman, though an affecting sight at that moment, was swinging the two children by means of a long rope, watching over them for fear of any accident with that animal-like and sublime expression typical of motherhood. With every movement back and forth, the hideous lynx emitted a strident noise that sounded like a screech of anger. The little girls were ecstatic. The setting sun commingled with this joy, and there was nothing to match the charm of this capriccio of chance that had made a cherubim swing of a titan's chain. As she swung her two little ones, the mother hummed in a discordant voice a then well-known ballad, A Warrior So Bold and a Virgin So Bright. Her song and the contemplation of her daughters prevented her from hearing and seeing what was going on in the street. In the meantime, someone had approached her as she began the first couplet of the ballad, and suddenly she heard a voice saying very close to her ear, "You have two lovely children there, madame." "Alonzo the Brave was the name of the knight. The maid's was the fair Imogen," responded the mother, continuing with her ballad. Then she looked around. A woman stood before her a few steps away. This woman, too, had a child, which she carried in her arms. She was also carrying quite a big traveling bag that looked very heavy. This woman's child was one of the most divine creatures anyone might hope to see. It was a little girl aged 2 or 3. She could have vied with the other two youngsters in the prettiness of her clothing. She wore a frilled cap of fine linen with ribbons on her sleeved top and Valenciennes laced on her bonnet. Her rucked-up skirt revealed her firm, white, chubby thigh. She was wonderfully pink and healthy. You felt like biting into the lovely little darling's apple cheeks. Nothing could be said about her eyes except that they must be very big, and they had magnificent eyelashes. She was asleep. She was sleeping that totally trustful sleep of children of that age. Mothers' arms are created out of tenderness. Children sleep deeply in them. As for the mother, she was a poor and sorry sight. She was dressed like a seamstress reverting to peasant again. She was young. Was she beautiful? Maybe, but the way she was dressed it was hard to tell. Her hair looked very thick, but was austerely hidden under an ugly, thick-woven, close-fitting coif tied under the chin, with one blonde lock escaping. Laughter shows off beautiful teeth if you have them, but she did not. Her eyes looked as if they had not been dry for a very long time. She was pale. She seemed very weary and a little unwell. She gazed at her daughter sleeping in her arms with that distinctive look of a mother who has nursed her child. A large blue handkerchief, such as war veterans use for blowing their noses. Oh, a surprise cat. Hey, buddy. War veterans use for blowing their noses, folded into a fichu, unflatteringly concealed her figure. She had weathered hands, all covered with freckles, a forefinger hardened and roughened by the needle, a cloak of coarse brown woolen stuff, a calico gown, and heavy shoes. It was Fantine. It was Fantine, not easily recognizable. Nevertheless, on close examination, she still retained her beauty. A dejected line that looked like the beginnings of irony creased her right cheek. As for her clothes, that ethereal outfit of muslin and ribbons, seemingly fashioned of mirth, frivolity, and music, all tinkling bells and the scent of lilac, had vanished like those beautiful glittering frosts mistaken for diamonds in the sunshine. They melt away and leave the branch completely black. 10 months had elapsed since the great lark. What had happened in those 10 months? We can guess. After abandonment came hardship. Fantine had immediately lost contact with Favourite, Zéphine, and Dahlia. The bond, once broken on the men's side, unraveled between the women. They would have been greatly astonished a fortnight later had anyone said they were friends. There was no reason to be any more. Fantine was left on her own. With the father of her children gone, alas, such partings are irrevocable, she found herself totally isolated, minus the habit of work, and plus the taste for pleasure. Led by her relationship with Ptolemies to disdain the modest trade she knew, she had neglected any openings. They were now closed to her. Nothing to fall back on. Fantine could hardly read and could not write. She had been taught as a child only to sign her name. She got a public letter writer to write to Ptolemies, a first letter, then a second, then a third. Ptolemies had not replied to any of them. One day Fantine heard some gossiping woman say, while looking at her daughter, "Does anyone take these children seriously? Everyone shrugs their shoulders at such children." Then she thought of Ptolemies, who shrugged off his child and did not take this innocent creature seriously. And her feelings darkened towards that man. But what was she to do? She was at a loss to know who to turn to now. She had done wrong, but she was by nature, let us remember, fundamentally modest and virtuous. She vaguely sensed she was on the brink of falling into destitution and sliding towards the very worst. Courage was needed. Courage she had, and she steeled herself. It occurred to her to return to her hometown of Montreuil-sur-Mer. There might be someone there who knew her and would give her work. Yes, but she would have to conceal her wrongdoing. And in a confused way she foresaw the need for a separation even more painful than the first. It wrung her heart. But she made her decision. Fantine, as we shall see, had the fierce bravery of life itself. Valiantly she had already given up all finery, dressing herself in calico, and had put all her silks, all her trimmings, ribbons, and lace on her daughter, her sole remaining vanity, and a saintly one at that. She sold everything she had, which yielded 200 francs. Having paid off her modest debts, she had only about 80 francs remaining. At the age of 22, on a beautiful spring morning, she left Paris, carrying her child on her back. Anyone seeing the two of them pass by would have felt pity for them. This woman had no one else in the world but her child, and the child no one else in the world but this woman. Fantine had nursed her child. This strained her chest, and she was coughing a little. We shall have no further occasion to speak of Monsieur Felix Ptolemies. All we wish to say is that 20 years later, under King Louis Philippe, he was a well-established provincial lawyer, wealthy and influential, a sound voter, and a very severe magistrate. Still a man of pleasure. Having taken a ride now and then, at roughly 1 or 2 sous per mile, with what was then known as the Petite Voiture Coach Company, serving the outlying areas of Paris, to give herself a rest, Fantine found herself towards the middle of the day at Montfermeil, in Rue de Boulanger. As she passed the Thénardier inn, the two little girls, delighting in their monster swing, had, as it were, dazzled her, and she stopped in front of that vision of joy. There are such things as spells. These two little girls acted as a spell on this mother. She observed them, overcome with emotion. Paradise is heralded by the presence of angels. She thought she could see above this inn the mysterious here of Providence. These two little ones were so obviously happy. She gazed at them, she marveled at them, with such feeling that as their mother drew breath between two lines of her song, she could not help saying to her those few words you have just read, "You have two lovely children there, madame." The most ferocious of creatures is disarmed by the petting of its young. The mother looked up and thanked her, and invited the wayfarer to sit on the bench by the door, she herself being on the doorstep. The two women chatted together. "My name's Madame Thénardier," said the mother of the two little girls. "We're the keepers of this inn." Then, continuing with the same ballad, she sang in an undertone, "Tomorrow I go to fight in a far distant land." This Madame Thénardier was a brawny and angular, sandy-haired woman. The archetypal soldier's wife in all her charmlessness, and bizarrely, with an introspective air that she owed to her penchant for romances, she was simpering, yet mannish. Old-fashioned love stories that have rubbed off on the imaginations of canteen cooks have that effect. She was still young, barely 30, being very tall and built like a walking colossus, such as you might expect to find in a fairground. This woman, who was squatting down, had she stood upright, might perhaps have scared the traveler from the outset, undermined her trustfulness, and forestalled what we have to relate. Someone sitting instead of standing. Destinies hang on this. The traveler told her story with some slight alteration. That she was a seamstress, that her husband was dead, that there was no work for her in Paris, and she was going to look for some elsewhere, back home where she came from. There she had left Paris that morning on foot. That, as she was carrying her child and felt tired, when the Villemomble coach had come by, she had taken it. That when Villemomble to Montfermeil she had walked. That her little one had walked a bit of the way, but not much, being so young, and that she had to pick her up and carry her, and the precious darling had fallen asleep. Whereupon she gave her daughter a fervent kiss that woke her. The child opened her eyes, big blue eyes like her mother's, and looked at... what? Nothing. Everything. With that serious and sometimes stern expression of young children, which is a mystery of their luminous innocence in the face of our twilight virtues. It is as if they feel like angels and know us to be men. Then the child began to laugh, and although her mother held her, she slipped to the ground with the untamable energy of a young creature that wants to run free. All of a sudden, she caught sight of the other two in their swing, came to a standstill, and stuck out her tongue, a sign of awe. Madame Thénardier released her daughters, helped them down from the swing, and said, "You three play together." At that age, children are quick to socialize, and after a minute, the little Thénardiers were playing with the newcomer, digging holes in the ground together with great delight. This newcomer was very cheerful. You can tell a mother's goodness from the cheerfulness of her toddler. She had found a stick that served her as a spade, and she was energetically digging a hole big enough for a fly. What the gravedigger does becomes amusing when done by a child. The two women went on chatting. "What's your little one's name?" "Cosette." For Cosette, read Euphrasie. The child's name was Euphrasie, but with that endearing and charming instinct that mothers and the populace have, by which Josepha is turned into Pepita and Francois into Celeste, Euphrasie became Cosette to her mother. This is the kind of derivation that confuses and confounds all the learning of etymologists. We know of one grandmother who managed to turn Theodore into Non. How old is she? Oh, she's going on 3. The same as my eldest. In the meantime, the 3 little girls were clustered in an attitude of deep anxiety and rapture. Something had happened. A big worm had emerged from the ground, and they were scared and entranced. With their radiant foreheads touching, it was as if their 3 heads were surrounded by a single halo. "Children make friends in no time," exclaimed Madame Thénardier. "Seeing them together like that, you'd swear they were 3 sisters." This remark was the spur the other woman had probably been waiting for. She seized the Thénardier woman's hand, looked at her intently, and said, "Will you look after my child for me?" The Thénardier woman gave one of those starts of surprise that are neither assent nor refusal. Cosette's mother went on, "You see, I can't take my daughter with me. Working won't allow it. You can't get a job with a child. They're so ridiculous in that part of the world. It was the good Lord that guided me to your inn. When I saw your little ones looking so pretty and so clean and so happy, my heart turned over. I said to myself, here's a good mother. For sure they'll be like 3 sisters, and then it won't be long before I return. Will you look after my child for me?" "We'd have to see," replied the Thénardier woman. "I'd pay 6 francs a month." At this point, a man's voice called out from inside the inn, "Not for less than 7 francs, and 6 months paid in advance." 6 sevens 42, said the Thénardier woman. "I'll pay it," said the mother. "And 15 francs extra for initial expenses," the man's voice added. 57 francs total, said Madame Thénardier, and throughout these calculations she hummed vaguely, "Tomorrow I go to fight in a far distant land." "I'll pay it," said the mother. "I have 80 francs. I'll have enough left over to get home. If I walk, I'll earn some money there, and as soon as I have a little, I'll come back to fetch my little angel." The man's voice spoke again. "The child has clothes?" "That's my husband," said the Thénardier woman. "Oh, certainly she has clothes, poor precious darling. Of course I realized it was your husband. And lovely clothes, too. A real extravagance, a dozen of everything, and silk gowns like a lady. They're all here in my bag." "You'll give those to us," said the man's voice. I should think so, too," said the mother. "It would be a very odd thing indeed if I were to leave my daughter without a stitch." The master's face appeared. "That's fine," he said. The deal was concluded. The mother spent the night at the inn, handed over the money, and left her child, refastened her traveling bag, now lightened with the child's things taken out, and set out the following morning, intending to return soon. Such departures are easily arranged, but they are harrowing. A neighbor of the Thénardiers met the mother as she was walking away, and came back saying, "I've just seen a woman crying in the street. It was heart-rending." When Cosette's mother had gone, the man said to the woman, "That'll pay off my debt for 110 francs that falls due tomorrow. I was 50 francs short. You know, I'd have had the bailiff on me with a warrant. That was a clever mousetrap you laid there with your babes. Without realizing it, said the woman. Need to drink some water and find my bookmark. There we go. Hey, everybody. We're at the halfway point. And this is when I normally am like, hey, check out the Patreon. I got that on the screen all the time. I should have been greedy back when there was like 8 or 10 people on here to say, hey, just spam the follow button, whichever corner it's in. Because we're trying to get more followers on the channel. Whether you actually watch on the channel live or on YouTube or later on, whatever, that's fine. We're just trying to get over 50 followers. But I'm pretty sure everyone who's still here already follows. And hey, thanks for that. But for those people on YouTube watching this at a later date, hey, patreon.com/HotDadReads. You get access to the super secret Saturday Shakespeare stream. You can get access to all the books we've read previously, which include Pride and Prejudice and War of the Worlds. We also are in the middle of reading Julius Caesar, and we've already read Much Ado About Nothing. And for the highest tier, I'll read something that you submit. So if you've got a book, a novel, a play, a poem, a song, as long as it's not racist or something, I'd love to read it. So if you want to get your work in front of an audience, head on over to patreon.com/HotDadReads and I'll read it. Got just like a little dinosaur over here, a little cat right here. Hey, buddy. He's doing his dragon thing where he just lays out and it's just like, Rah. It's real cute. Pardon me. I adjusted my lighting and I'm kind of looking at it now and I think it works. I got my key light. I got my rim light. It's actually doing a good job of kind of getting a little bit of a fill in the background there. Environmental light, I forget what it's called. Yeah, because fill light would be like this part. But I don't have a fill light on purpose because I like the shadow. Anyway, Chapter 2, First Sketch of Two Shady Characters. It was a very poor mouse that had been caught, but the cat is happy, even with a scraggy mouse. Who were these Thénardiers? Let us say a few words about them right now. We will complete the sketch later. These individuals belonged to that bastard class between the so-called middle class and the so-called lower class, which is made up of crass people who have come up in the world and clever people who have gone down, and combined some of the faults of the latter with nearly all the vices of the former, without having the generous impulse of the working man or the law-abiding decency of the solid citizen. It's a heck of a sentence. They were of that stunted nature that easily turns monstrous if some dark passion is by chance kindled in them. There was in the woman the essence of a bully, and in the man the makings of a scoundrel. Both were most highly susceptible to the sort of hideous progress that occurs in the development of evil. There are souls like lobsters, continually retreating into the shadows, retrogressing rather than advancing through life, using experience to add to their monstrosity, becoming ever more wicked and ever more imbued with an intensifying foulness. This woman and this man were such souls. Thénardier in particular gave the physiognomist pause. You have only to look at some men to distrust them. You sense a shadiness in their lives at both ends. Behind them is a restlessness, taken forward with menace. They have something of the unknown in them. You can no more answer for what they have done than for what they will do. The darkness they have in their eyes betrays them. You have only to hear them say one word or see them make one gesture to glimpse sinister secrets in their past and sinister mysteries in their future. If he was to be believed, this fellow Thénardier had been a soldier, a sergeant, he said. He had probably taken part in the campaign of 1815 and had even acquitted himself quite bravely, it would seem. We shall see later what the truth of this was. His inn sign was an allusion to one of his feats of arms. He had painted it himself, for he knew how to do a little of everything, badly. It was the age when the classic period novel, that having once been Clélie, was now a mere Lodoiska, a still high-minded but increasingly vulgar, reduced from Mademoiselle to Scudery to Madame Bartholomew Hadot, and from Madame de Lafayette to Madame Bournem-Malarme, inflamed the lovesick souls of Paris's doorkeepers and even wreaked a little havoc in the suburbs. Madame Thénardier was just intelligent enough to read books of this kind. They were her staple diet. She steeped in them what brains she possessed. This had given her, when she was very young, and even a little later, a kind of pensiveness in the company of her husband, a rascal of a certain knowingness, a literate ruffian, but no grammarian, at once coarse and shrewd, but as regards sentiment, a reader of Pigot Lebrun, and as for anything to do with sex, as his own turn of phrase would have it, an absolute, thorough-going lout. His wife was 12 or 15 years younger than he was. Later, when her romantically cascading hair began to turn gray, when out of Pamela emerged Megara, the Thénardier woman was just a nasty, fat woman with a taste for silly novels. Now, nonsense cannot be read with impunity. The result was that her eldest daughter's name was Éponine. As for the younger, the poor little thing was very nearly named Gulnare. She owed it to who knows what happy distraction afforded by one of Ducray Duménil's novels only to be called Azelma. I only know the musical. Did you know Éponine had a sister? 'Cause I didn't know Éponine had a sister. I'm worried she's gonna die. By the way, the fact is that not everything about that curious era we are alluding to here, which might be called one of the first-name anarchy, is absurd and superficial. Alongside this romantic element we have just referred to, there is the social factor. It is not uncommon nowadays for the young cowherd to be called Arthur, Alfred, or Alphonse, and for the Vicomte, if there are any Vicomtes left, to be called Thomas, Pierre, or Jacques, or, as I like in not much ado. What did I do? Not much ado about nothing. As you like it, Jaques, or Jakes. This displacement, whereby the distinguished name is given to the common man and the rustic name to the aristocrat, is nothing other than the stirrings of egalitarianism. The irresistible penetration of the new spirit is in this as in everything else. Behind this apparent discrepancy there is something great and profound: the French Revolution. A little bit of water. We'll do chapter 3. Oh. It's a very heavy book. And I've broken my wrists 5 times in my life. So I always gotta stretch and be nice to my wrists. Chapter 3, The Lark. Just being wicked is not enough to prosper. Business was bad at the inn. Thanks to the traveler's 57 francs, Thénardier managed to avoid a protest for non-payment and to honor what he had put his signature to. The following month they were again in need of money. The woman took Cosette's clothes to Paris and pawned them for 60 francs. Once that sum was spent, the Thénardiers came to regard the little girl as no more than a child they had taken in out of charity and treated her accordingly. As she no longer had any clothes of her own, they dressed her in the little Thénardier girl's cast-off petticoats and chemises. I don't know how to pronounce that word. Chemises? Chamois? Chemises? That is to say, in rags. They fed her on everyone's scraps. A little better than the dog, a little worse than the cat. In fact, the cat and dog were her habitual dining companions. Cosette ate with them under the table from a wooden bowl like theirs. Her mother, who had settled in Montreuil-sur-Mer, as we shall see, wrote a letter every month, or to be more accurate, had someone else write, asking for news of her child. The Thénardiers invariably replied, "Cosette is thriving." At the end of the first 6 months, the mother sent 7 francs for the 7th month, and continued sending her payments quite punctually month by month. Before the year was over, Thénardier said, "A fine favor she's doing us. How does she expect us to manage on her 7 francs?" And he wrote, demanding 12 francs. Led by them to believe that her child was happy and doing well, the mother submitted to the demand and sent the 12 francs. Certain natures are incapable of loving on the one hand without hating on the other. Madame Thénardier loved her 2 daughters passionately, which meant she hated the outsider. It is sad to think that a mother's love can have ugly aspects to it. No matter how little space Cosette took up in their home, she felt it was space taken from her own children, and that this little girl reduced the air her daughters breathed. This woman, like many women of her kind, had a certain quantity of endearments and a certain quantity of blows and harsh words to dispense each day. For all that they were idolized, her daughters would have undoubtedly got the lot if she had not had Cosette there. But the outsider did them the service of diverting the blows onto herself. For her daughters, she had only endearments. Cosette could not make a single move that did not bring down on her a hailstorm of violent and undeserved punishments. Sweet, defenseless creature, to whom this world and God must have been a complete mystery, incessantly punished, scolded, ill-used, and beaten, seeing beside her 2 little creatures just like her who lived within the glow of a kindly light. Madame Thénardier was cruel to Cosette. Éponine and Azelma were cruel. Children at that age are simply copies of their mother. They come in a smaller size, that is all. A year went by, then another. It was said in the village, "Those Thénardiers are good people. They're not rich, and yet they're bringing up a poor abandoned child they were left with." It was thought Cosette had been forgotten by her mother. Meanwhile, having learned by who knows what obscure channels, that the child was probably illegitimate, and that the mother could not acknowledge her as her own, Thénardier demanded 15 francs a month, saying the creature was growing up and eating and threatening to turn her out. "She better not give me any trouble," he shouted. "I'll send her brat back to her, and her little secrets will blow up in her face. I must have more." The mother paid the 15 francs. As the child grew, year by year, so did her wretchedness. As long as Cosette was very small, she was the 2 other children's scapegoat. As soon as she got a little bigger, that is to say, before she was even 5, she became the household servant. 5 years old, the reader will say. That is incredible. Alas, it is true. Social sufferings begins at all ages. Have we not recently seen the trial of a certain Dumollard by name, an orphan turned bandit, who from the age of 5, official documents state, being all alone in the world, worked for his living and stole? Cosette was made to run errands, sweep the rooms, the courtyard and the street, wash the dishes, even to carry heavy loads. The Thénardiers considered themselves all the more entitled to behave in this way, since the mother, who was still at Montreuil-sur-Mer, began to fall behind with her payments. She was some months in arrears. If this mother had returned to Montfermeil at the end of those 3 years, she would not have recognized her child. So pretty and fresh when she first came to that house, Cosette was now thin and pale. She had an indefinably anxious look. Sly, said the Thénardiers. Injustice had made her resentful, and misery had made her ugly. All that was left of her prettiness were those lovely eyes that were pitiful to behold, because, huge as they were, the sadness that was visible in them appeared so much the greater. It was a heart-breaking thing to see in winter this poor child, not yet 6 years old, shivering in her tattered old rags of coarse cloth, sweeping the street before daylight, with an enormous broom in her tiny red hands and a teardrop in those big eyes. Locally, they called her Alouette. L'Alouette is the morning bird, the lark. The common people, who, like figurative images, had chosen to give this name to this tiny creature, no bigger than a bird, trembling, frightened, and shivering, the first one awake every morning, in the house and in the village, always out on the street or in the fields before daybreak. Only poor Alouette never sang. Hey, we got 30 minutes left. Ooh, thank you so much for the follow. Really means a lot. And I think that brings me halfway to my goal, so woo! Very excited for that. Thank you so much. To everyone who follows, thank you so much. I often don't get to call them out because I'm reading and I don't notice or something, but that's awesome. This book is sad. This book about Les Miserables is real. It's real sad. As I was saying before about drinking Coca-Colas from the glass bottle, delicious as they are, they definitely dry out the throat a bit. But we can make the next half hour. Hey, Book 5, The Descent, Chapter 1, Story of an Advance in the Manufacture of Black Glass Jewelry. I always apologize for all the mouth sounds. When I record audiobooks, I'm able to edit those out, and whatnot. But this is live. I'm just reading a book. Anyway. What had become of that mother in the meantime, who, according to the people of Montfermeil, appeared to have abandoned her child? Where was she? What was she doing? After leaving her little Cosette with the Thénardiers, she had continued on her way and arrived at Montreuil-sur-Mer. This, remember, was in 1818. Fantine had left her provincial home some 10 years earlier. Montreuil-sur-Mer had changed. While Fantine's fortunes were slowly declining, her native town had prospered. About 2 years previously, there had been one of those industrial developments that have a great impact on small places. This detail is significant and one we think worthwhile expanding on. We would almost say emphasizing. From time immemorial, Montreuil-sur-Mer's specialized industry had been the imitation of English jet jewelry and of the black glass jewelry of Germany. This industry had always languished because of the high price of the raw materials, which affected the workers' pay. When Fantine returned to Montreuil-sur-Mer, an amazing transformation had taken place in this production of blackware. Towards the end of 1815, a man, a stranger, had come and set up business in the town and had the idea of substituting shellac for resin in the manufacturing process and, for bracelets in particular, using metal clasp links that were simply pinched together instead of soldered. This very small change had been a revolution. This very small change had, in fact, dramatically reduced the cost of the raw materials, which made it possible, firstly, for the labor costs to rise to the benefit of the local community, secondly, to improve the workmanship, an advantage for the consumer, and thirdly, to sell more cheaply while at the same time trebling profits, by which the manufacturer gained. So 3 positive results from one idea. In less than 3 years, the inventor of this process had become rich, which is good, and made everyone around him rich, which is better. He came from outside the département. Nothing at all was known about his background, very little about his early career. The story was that he had come to the town with very little money, a few hundred francs at most. It was from this limited capital, used to implement an ingenious idea and systematically and thoughtfully husbanded, that he had built up his fortune and the fortunes of the whole community. When he first arrived in Montreuil-sur-Mer, the clothes he wore, his bearing, and his language were no more than those of a laborer. Apparently, on the very day he made his obscure entry into the small town of Montreuil-sur-Mer, at nightfall one December evening, with his knapsack on his back and a hawthorn staff in his hand, a serious fire had just broken out in the town hall. This man had rushed into the blaze and at the risk of his own life saved 2 children, who turned out to belong to the captain of the gendarmerie. As a result, no one had thought to ask him for his passport. Since then, his name had come to be common knowledge. He was called Père Madeleine. But we know who he really is. Chapter 2, Père Madeleine. He was a man of about 50, who looked as if he had something on his mind, and was kind-hearted. That was all that could be said about him. Thanks to the rapid development of the industry, he had so admirably restructured Montreuil-sur-Mer became an important center of commerce. Spain, which buys a great deal of black jet, placed huge orders there every year. Montreuil-sur-Mer almost rivaled London and Berlin in this trade. Père Madeleine's profits were such that, by the second year, he was able to build a large factory in which there were 2 huge workrooms, one for men and the other for women. Anyone who was hungry could go there and be sure of finding work and being fed. Père Madeleine expected willingness of the men, respectability of the women, and honesty of everybody. He had divided the workrooms to keep the 2 sexes apart, and so that the girls and the women might remain virtuous. On this point he was adamant. It was the only thing about which he was in any way intolerant. He was all the more justified in this strictness because, Montreuil-sur-Mer being a garrison town, opportunities for depravity were rife. In any event, his coming had been a boom, and his presence was a godsend. Before Père Madeleine's arrival, the whole place was languishing. Now, everything there was sustained by the wholesomeness of the working life. A strong circulation is entirely beneficial and reaches everywhere. Unemployment and poverty were unknown. There was no pocket so obscure that it had not a little money in it, no home so poor that it had not a little gladness in it. Père Madeleine would employ anyone. He insisted on one thing only: be an honest man, be an honest woman. As we have said, out of this activity of which he was the prime mover and linchpin, Père Madeleine made his fortune. But rather, curiously, in a simple man of business, this was not apparently his chief concern. He seemed to give a great deal of thought to others and little to himself. In 1820 he was known to have a sum of 630,000 francs to his name, invested with Lafitte. 630,000 francs. Dear Lord. But before setting aside these 630,000 francs, he had spent more than $1 million on the town and its poor. Pardon me. The hospital was ill-funded. He financed 10 beds there. Montreuil-sur-Mer, so divided into the upper town and the lower town where he lived had but one school. Pardon me. A miserable hovel that was falling into ruin. He built 2, one for the girls, the other for the boys. Out of his own pocket he paid the 2 school teachers an additional allowance, doubling their meager official salary, and one day he said to someone who wondered at this, "The state's 2 most important servants are the woman at whose breast the child is nurtured and the schoolmaster." He created at his own expense a nursery, something almost unknown in France at that time, and a welfare fund for old and infirm workers. His factory being a central point, a new neighborhood with a great many poor families rapidly sprang up around it. He set up a free pharmacy here. In the early days, watching him start out, charitable souls said, "He's a self-seeker who wants to become rich." When they saw him enriching the community before he enriched himself, the same charitable souls said, "He's an ambitious fellow." This seemed all the more probable as the man was religious, and even to some extent religiously observant, something very favorably looked on at that time. He regularly attended low mass every Sunday. Before long, the local deputy, who suspected rivals everywhere, began to fret about this religion. The deputy, who had been a member of the legislative corps under the Empire, shared the religious views of an Oratorian father known by the name of Foch, Duc de Trente, whose creature and friend he had been. Behind closed doors he quietly made fun of God. But when he saw the wealthy manufacturer Madeleine going to low mass at 7 o'clock, he detected in him a likely candidate and resolved to outdo him. He took a Jesuit confessor and attended high mass and vespers. At that time ambition was literally a steeplechase. The poor, as well as the good Lord, profited by this dread, for the honorable deputy also funded 2 beds in the hospital, which made a total of 12. A steeplechase, as a bit of hot dad trivia here, if you think of, if you've ever read Old Curiosity Shop, I did that play, which is a lot of fun. But a steeplechase is a horse race, and basically there isn't a track. There isn't a racetrack, a horse track, anything like that. They're starting at one point, and they're riding to another point, and that point is marked by a church steeple. So they're just riding through people's yards. If you watch My Fair Lady, for example, that's a steeplechase. So the end of Act 1 and the beginning of Act 2, I forget, but that part we're all just very stoically watching it go by. That's why they're all just camped out on someone's yard, basically, and then all the horses run by. So it's like if you think about something like the Tour de France, where it's like, oh, cool, I go out on the street and the whole race goes by, and then I go back in my house, kind of a thing. Or a parade, I suppose. But the idea of a steeplechase is that you're chasing that steeple. So you're just riding and you're jumping over all the fences of all the farms and the lots and the houses and things like that. So many of the sports and things that we know of now and with horseback riding and stuff, they all come from steeplechase. And in this impromptu break, I'm going to drink some water. Nevertheless, in 1819, the rumor went around town one morning that as a result of representations made by the prefect, and in consideration of his services to the town, Père Madeleine was to be appointed mayor of Montreuil-sur-Mer by the king. Those who had declared the newcomer to be an ambitious fellow seized with delight on this opportunity that everybody longs for to exclaim, "There! What did we tell you?" The whole of Montreuil-sur-Mer was in ferment. The rumor was well founded. Several days later, the appointment appeared in Le Moniteur. The next day, Père Madeleine declined the appointment. In the same year of 1819, the products of the new process invented by Madeleine featured in the industrial exhibition. On the recommendation of the jury, the king named the inventor a Knight of the Legion of Honor. Fresh rumblings in the small town. Well, then, it was the cross he wanted. Père Madeleine refused the cross. No doubt about it, the man was an enigma. The charitable souls defended themselves by saying, after all, he's some sort of adventurer. We have seen that the community owed him a great deal. The poor owed him everything. He was so useful, it was inevitable that he should eventually be honored, and he was so kind-hearted, it was inevitable that he should eventually be loved. His workers in particular adored him, and he bore this adoration with a sort of melancholy gravity. When his wealth was established, society people greeted him, and in town he was called Monsieur Madeleine. His workers and the children continued to call him Père Madeleine, and this was the thing best able to make him smile. As his stock rose, he was showered with invitations. Society clamored for him. The prim little drawing rooms of Montreuil-sur-Mer, at first closed, of course, for the artisan, were opened wide to the millionaire. Countless overtures were made to him. He declined them all. This time again, the charitable souls were quite unabashed. He's an ignorant man of little education. God knows what his background is. He wouldn't know how to behave in society. There's no proof at all he can read. When he was seen making money, they said, he's a tradesman. When he was seen distributing this money, they said, he's an ambitious fellow. When he was seen rejecting honors, they said, he's an adventurer. When he was seen rejecting society, they said, he's a crass ignoramus. In 1820, 5 years after his arrival on Montreuil-sur-Mer, the services he had rendered to the community were so outstanding, the will of the entire region so unanimous, that the king again appointed him mayor of the town. Again he declined, but the prefect would not accept his refusal. All the dignitaries came to entreat him. The people in the street implored him. So intense was their insistence that in the end he accepted. It was noted that what seemed especially to make up his mind was the almost angry rebuke of an old woman, one of the common people, who called out to him crossly from her doorstep, "A good mayor can be useful. Why shrink from doing good?" This was the third phase of his ascent. Père Madeleine had become Monsieur Madeleine. Monsieur Madeleine had become Monsieur le Maire. 18 minutes left. Just checking how long this chapter is. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we can do at least 2 more. Chapter 3, Sums Deposited with Lafitte. Nevertheless, he remained as unassuming as he was on the first day. He had gray hair, a serious gaze, the weathered complexion of a laborer, the pensive face of a philosopher. He usually wore a broad-brimmed hat and a long frock coat of coarse cloth, buttoned to the chin. He fulfilled his duties as mayor, but aside from that, he lived a solitary life. He spoke to few people. He would sidestep social pleasantries, pay his respects in passing, and quickly slip away. Smile by way of apology for not chatting, give by way of apology for not smiling. Women said to him, "What a kindly old bear." His pleasure was to go walking in the countryside. Pardon me. He always took his meals alone, with a book open in front of him that he would be reading. He had a small but well-selected library. He loved books. Books are cold and dependable friends. With wealth came leisure, which he seemed increasingly to take advantage of to cultivate his mind. It was observed that since he had been in Montreuil-sur-Mer, his language had, year by year, grown more refined, more carefully chosen, gentler. He liked to carry a shotgun with him on his walks, but he rarely made use of it. Whenever he happened to do so, his shooting was fearsomely accurate. He never killed a harmless animal. He never shot a small bird. Although he was not a young man anymore, stories were told of his remarkable strength. He would lend a hand to anyone in need of it, lift a horse, push a wheel stuck in the mud, or stop a runaway bull by the horns. His pockets were always full of money when he went out, and empty when he came home. Whenever he passed through a village, ragged urchins ran gleefully after him and surrounded him like a swarm of gnats. People thought they could tell he must have once lived in a country life, since he knew all sorts of useful secrets, which he passed on to the peasants. He taught them how to destroy corn moth by spraying the granary and dousing cracks in the floorboards with a solution of common salt, and how to ward off weevils by hanging flowering orviot everywhere, on the walls and in the rafters, in the barns and inside the houses. He had recipes for ridding a field of yellow vetchling, corncockle vetch, cow wheat, meadow foxtail, all the parasitic weeds that choke the wheat crop. He would protect a rabbit hutch against rats just by the smell of a small guinea pig he put inside it. One day he saw some local country folk very busy pulling up nettles. He looked at their pile of uprooted and already dried out plants and said, "That's all dead. Yet it would be a good thing if you knew how to make use of it. When the nettle's young, the leaf makes an excellent vegetable. When it ages, it has filaments and fibers like hemp and flax. Cloth made from nettles is as good as linen cloth. Chopped up, nettles are good for poultry. Pounded, they're good for horned livestock. The seed of the nettle mixed with fodder gives a shine to animals' coats. The root, mixed with salt, produces a beautiful yellow color. Also, it makes an excellent hay that can be harvested twice. And what does the nettle need? A little soil, no tending, no cultivation. Only the seeds fall as they ripen, and they're difficult to harvest. That's all. With even the minimum of care, the nettle would be useful. Neglected, it becomes a nuisance. So we kill it. How like the nettle are so many men," he added after a pause. "My friends, remember this. There are no such things as bad plants or bad men. There are only bad farmers." Children also loved him because he could make delightful little toys out of straw and coconuts. Whenever he saw the church door draped in black, he would go in. He sought out funerals as others seek out christenings. Widowhood and the grief of others attracted him because of his great kindness. He would mingle with friends in mourning, families dressed in black, priests murmuring round a coffin. He seemed to take readily as subject for his thoughts those funeral chantings filled with the vision of another world. With his eyes turned heavenward, with a kind of yearning towards all the mysteries of infinity, he listened to those sad voices singing at the edge of death's dark abyss. He performed a host of good deeds in the same way that others do bad, by stealth. He would slip into houses surreptitiously in the evening and furtively climb the stairs. Some poor devil coming home to his attic would find that, during his absence, his door had been opened, sometimes even forced. The poor man would cry out, "Some burglar has got in!" He would go inside, and the first thing he would see was a gold coin left lying on a piece of furniture. The burglar who had got in was Père Madeleine. He was affable and sad. The common people said, "There's a rich man who doesn't give himself airs. There's a fortunate man who doesn't look happy." Some people held the view that he was a mysterious character, and said that no one ever went into his bedroom, which was a veritable anchorite cell, furnished with winged hourglasses and ornamented with skulls and crossbones. There was so much talk of this that some sly, sophisticated young women of Montreuil-sur-Mer came to him one day and asked, "Monsieur le Maire, do show us your room. It's said to be a grotto." He smiled and showed them into his grotto there and then. They got their just deserts for their curiosity. It was a very ordinary room, with rather ugly mahogany furniture, like all furniture of that kind, and papered with inexpensive wallpaper. They could see nothing remarkable about it except 2 candlesticks of an old-fashioned design that stood on the mantelpiece and appeared to be made of silver, from the way they were treasured. A thoroughly small-town witticism. It continued to be said, regardless, that no one was ever let into this room, and that it was a hermit's cave, a mysterious retreat, a cubbyhole, a tomb. It was also whispered that he had immense sums deposited with Lafitte on the specific condition that the money was always immediately available to him, which meant, it was added, that Monsieur Madeleine could turn up at Lafitte's one morning and in 10 minutes sign a receipt and carry off his 2 or 3 million. In reality, these 2 or 3 million, as we have said, amounted to no more than 630 or 40,000 francs. We got time. Chapter 4, Monsieur Madeleine in Mourning. At the beginning of 1821, the newspapers announced the death of Monsieur Myriel, Bishop of Digne, better known as Monseigneur Bienvenu, who had passed away in the odor of sanctity at the age of 82. I'm sad this guy died. He had to, but the beginning of the book is all about this bishop who just died, and he's a saint. It's amazing. To add here a detail that the papers omitted, when the Bishop of Digne died, he had for many years been blind, and contentedly blind, having his sister with him. Incidentally, let us say that on this earth there is nothing so perfect. To be blind and to be loved is, in fact, one of the most strangely exquisite forms of happiness. To have continually at your side a wife, a daughter, a sister, a delightful human being who is there because you need her and because she cannot do without you. To know you are indispensable to a person who is necessary to you. to be able constantly to measure her affection by how much of her presence she grants you, and to say to yourself, since she devotes all of her time to me, I must have all of her love. To see the mind, though you cannot see the face. To be able to count on the loyalty of one person when the world is eclipsed. To perceive in the rustle of a gown the fluttering of wings. To hear her, toeing and froing, going about, coming home, talking, singing, and to think that you are at the center of these footsteps, of this talking and singing. To demonstrate at every moment your own magnetic power, to feel all the more powerful the more infirm you are, to become, in the darkness and by means of the darkness, the star round which this angel gravitates. Few joys equal this. The supreme happiness of life is the conviction that you are loved, loved for yourself. Better still, loved despite yourself. This conviction the blind man has. In his plight, to be assisted is to be cherished. Does he lack anything? No. There is no loss of light in having love. And what love! A love that is all goodness. There is no blindness where there is certainty. Soul gropes for soul and finds it. And the soul found and tested is a woman. A hand supports you. It is... There was a fly that startled me. A hand supports you. It is hers. Lips brush your forehead. They are her lips. You hear someone breathing right beside you. It is she. To have all of her, from her devotion to her pity, never to be left alone, to have that sweet frailty helping you, to lean on that sturdy reed, to touch Providence with your hands, and to be able to take it in your arms. God made tangible. What rapture! The heart, that obscure celestial flower, comes into mysterious bloom. You would not exchange this darkness for any brightness. The angel's soul is there, ever there. If she goes away, it is only to return again. She vanishes like a dream and reappears as reality. You feel a warmth approaching her. Here she is. Your serenity, cheerfulness, and bliss are abounding. You are a radiance in the dark, and so much care and consideration. Little things that count enormously in that void, the most ineffable tones of the female voice devoted to soothing you and making up for the vanished universe. You are spiritually cherished. You see nothing, but you feel adored. It is a dark paradise. It was from this paradise that Monseigneur Bienvenu had passed on to the next. The local announcement of his death was reported by Montreuil-sur-Mer's local newspaper. The following day, Monsieur Madeleine appeared dressed entirely in black with a mourning band on his hat. These mourning clothes were noticed in town, and set tongues wagging. It seemed to throw a light on Monsieur Madeleine's origins. The conclusion was drawn that he had had some relationship with the venerable bishop. "He's wearing mourning for the Bishop of Dinan," was the word in the drawing rooms. This greatly enhanced Monsieur Madeleine's standing, and immediately gained him a certain respect among Montreuil-sur-Mer's nobility. The local miniature Faubourg Saint-Germain decided to end their exclusion of Monsieur Madeleine, assumed to be related to the bishop. Monsieur Madeleine was alerted to the advancement he had obtained by more bows of respect from the older women and more smiles from the younger ones. One evening, curious by right of seniority, a doyen of that small, grand world ventured to ask him, "Monsieur le Maire is doubtless a cousin of the late Bishop of Dinan." No, madame, he said. But you're wearing mourning for him, the dowager persisted. He replied, That's because in my youth I was a servant in his family. It was also noted that every time a young Savoyard, roaming around the area looking for chimneys to sweep, came into town, Monsieur le Maire would send for him, ask him his name, and give him money. The little Savoyards told each other about this, and a great many of them came by. Are these snakes? Are these dragons? Yeah. Got a whole little parade here. A whole little legion of Trogdors. Thank you for those. Those are fun. I'm calling it for the night. That was a good 2 hours. And thank you so much for sticking around. To everyone who joined, who could stay when they could stay, thank you so much. And of course, if you want to watch these again later or catch up on previous chapters, they're all in their various parts in the Twitch and also on YouTube at youtube.com/@HotDadReads. Of course, patreon.com/HotDadReads if you want to financially support the stream. And if you don't want to financially support the stream but still want to support it, just hit the follow button. And once we get over 50, then I can start taking money from Jeff Bezos. So help me. Read all of the books that I never read in high school but was supposed to read. Help me do your homework for you. Help me make you understand Les Miserables. Help me learn French by, just sheer force of will. And, take money from Jeff Bezos. Out of water. Smiles and things. Yeah, we'll get some Spanish too. Once Marius shows up, once we get more French schoolboys and whatnot. Yeah, I think tomorrow, tomorrow's Wednesday. Yeah, I think I'm still here Wednesday. Yeah, tomorrow, same time. 9 o'clock is my time. We'll go for 2 hours. And actually, let me see. We're on page 155. Okay, part 2 doesn't happen until page 277, so 120 some pages. But how much did we read today? That's Apambarda's chapter in which lovers adore. Ptolemy's wisdom was 124. We got to 154. 155. So, 30 pages. 30 pages a day. 1,300 pages. Yeah, it's going to take some months. But we're going to do it. Woo! Thank you so much. And I hope that you have an agreeable evening.